Hello, Tech Pros, episode 106.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week, we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Ron Drodos. Happy Monday, Ron.
Hey, Chad. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Are you ready to get this week started highly motivated?
Oh, definitely.
Awesome. After a 30-year career playing piano in the worlds of jazz and Broadway, New York City-based pianist and composer Ron Drodos turned his attention to online teaching. In 2012, he created the KeyboardImprov.com website to teach pianists all over the world how to improvise and play great jazz piano. Ron, that sounds awesome. I have never learned how to play piano, other than just tinkering around as a kid, playing on my grandmother's stand-up upright. And it was always fun, but I always really respected musicians who could just sit down and not have sheet music in front of them, but just could improvise and just, you hum a few bars or sing a few bars and they just make it up.
Yeah, I mean, you could, Chad. I mean, the interesting thing is that so many adults have that same story that you do. They played piano when they were kids, and even if they had like a really great piano teacher, they probably didn't do much improvisation. It was the classical, which is wonderful, but music is so much like a language. And if you only do the written music and interpret Chopin and Beethoven and everything, it's kind of like being an actor, interpreting someone else's words, which is great. It taps into your emotions. It gives you peak experiences and everything. But you never really get the conversational aspect of it, like we're talking right now, And that's what improvisation is, really, whether it's rock, jazz, folk, or even classical improv. And back in the day, all the classical composers taught improvisation too. It's kind of a shame it's sort of fizzled out, over the years.
Man, well, maybe you can get into inspiring us to bring it back. But first, let's talk a little bit about your website. So you've got keyboardimprov.com, and as you know, Ron, our listeners here are technical professionals. They range from software developers to database administrators to entrepreneurs who are building new apps and doing big things. So tell us about Keyboard Improv and what's some of the tech behind it.
That's a great question, and I've been doing this for almost 4 years now, and I think the interesting thing from the tech perspective and your listeners' perspective is that I came at it from the complete opposite direction. I didn't know, I wasn't even on Facebook when I started this. Matter of fact, when I got the idea for the Keyboard Improv website, I joined Facebook, just as on my personal profile, just to get a taste of the online world. I'd never really done anything in that before. And I was a working musician. I was out every night playing Broadway shows and, Carnegie Hall, jazz clubs, whatever it was. And I just got the idea that, I could put what I've been doing for 30 years online. I had always taught piano on the side, and I loved doing it. And I didn't quite know how to go about it, but I knew it had to be something with video, because I felt that as great as all the jazz books and improv books out there are, they're really lacking something just by the fact that they're books. Mm-hmm. A book cannot take somebody step by step by step by step and give them the actual experience that they need to get in order to learn how to improvise. Just because a book is really content-based and not as experiential. And I thought that if you were to make a book that long, it would be like 5,000 pages long, because you need a lot of repetition at every stage, and books can't do that. So they, not to put down books in general, but people tend to if they only work out of method books and such, they tend to get frustrated because the books get very technical very quickly. So I thought, okay, it has to be video-based, and I thought a membership subscription site would be great, because it would really motivate people to stay with it, because they'd have contact with me personally too through Skype or exchange of videos and such. And so I didn't know anything about it, so I had the brother of a friend of mine was a website developer, and I talked to him, and And he did an amazing job. He put together this whole. It's a WordPress site, and right now I'm hosting the videos on Wistia, which I'm very happy with.
Nice.
And that's pretty much it. And I don't really know how to code at all, but I've learned how to create pages and upload videos and everything. And it's been really fun to get into the tech world, at least for what I need to learn from it.
So I love that story, and what I love about it was that you were not afraid of the tech. You didn't have the experience that maybe some other folks have, when they're first getting started. But you said, hey, I want to learn about this. And now I've figured out that there's a niche that's underserved in the market that I could help with. I just got to learn this tech, and I don't have to be the world's best expert at it, but I got to know enough to know how to present my material and get connected to this audience. So what was that learning experience like for you? So in a moment, you're going to teach us about how you teach other people how to learn, but how did you learn the technical side?
That's a great question. And actually, I've always looked at it the same way as I teach other people. So you really sort of hit the nail on the head there, Chad. I just think that going through life, we can't learn everything in life, but when an opportunity presents itself and it's something that serves or supports the meaning that we're finding in life, whether it's learning how to play piano or teaching others, in my case, I just embraced it. And luckily, the business grew slowly at first, which I wanted. I didn't even do anything with it for 6 months because, things would come up. Videos wouldn't load or somebody's server wasn't working. And I didn't know anything about that stuff. So I would call my tech person, and I have a wonderful person named Tom Morton now down in Florida, and they would just sort of answer these questions for me, and then I just had to accept. And this is the same thing with improvisation. You have to accept that there's an unknown, and you can't get frustrated if you don't know it right away. I think to just say, okay, well, I don't know anything about this, and I think, let's see, there was one thing that was so fascinating. At first, the videos were, it was crashing on mobile devices. So somebody would look at my, say, Intro to Jazz series or something, and they could access all the videos if they were on their desktop or a laptop. But if they were on their iPad or smartphone, they would crash. They'd open up a video and then it would just stop or something. Mm-hmm. And there was one woman who's still with me, studying with me after a few years in Canada, in rural Canada. So she doesn't have great Wi-Fi. And she was so patient because I think I even gave her, a lot of extra attention because I wanted to solve this problem, and she was helping me solve it because she was the one that was willing to say, okay, it's crashing, and I'd say, try this video, and okay, it's not working, and it's working on this device. And it was so funny because I called up, I was using another company to host videos at the time. I called them up, and they couldn't come up with a solution. My tech person couldn't come up with a solution. The person who created the website couldn't come up with a solution. And me, who knew nothing about technology, I came up with a solution because I stuck with it. Mm. And what was happening was it was just too many embeds on one page. The way it was set up was maybe there was 30 videos on one page just scrolling down, and that was crashing on the mobile devices. And so I just created all these new pages, and I put a different lesson on each page, a different video embed on each page. And that worked. And then I called all these other people back and I said, does this make sense? And they're like, oh, yeah, that could happen.
Wow, that's awesome. So first of all, congratulations on sticking with it. I think so many times, not just in technology, but just life in general, stuff happens and we go, I don't know. It works for me on my end. I don't know what problem you're having. And we just don't stick with it. And we don't talk to the users and try different things and experiment to figure out what exactly is going on. So I think this is a great example of both customer service as well as, learning tech and being a new person who's not afraid to ask, questions and get involved and get hands-on and just try some stuff. So good job on doing that. I know it helped that individual user, but now it's also helping to scale and grow your business because other people are not going to run into that problem that individual had.
Exactly, and I knew too. As you could tell, I knew that I had to get over that hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as the business grew, and I knew it would start growing faster at a certain point, which it has. I just knew that that would be a major stumbling block. So I really didn't have a choice, but it was fun to sort of say, okay, I'm going to figure this out, and I did.
That's awesome. And what a great motivational story. And speaking of motivational stories, today is Motivation Monday on Hello Tech Pros, and we're all about getting fired up and firing up those around us and overcoming these obstacles in our life, overcoming these obstacles in our career that just get us down. Sometimes on a Monday, I'm talking to a guest or I'm just trying to get out of bed, getting ready to talk to a guest, and I'm just not feeling it. And I need my guests' energy and their spirit to help motivate me and get me started in the week. And in past careers, as in software development and IT management, man, there were a lot of Mondays and just a lot of days in general where I just wasn't feeling it. And I was down on myself and down on the world and everything else. So, Ron, what I'd like you to do is tell us your story, a personal story of a time when you didn't have the motivation, when you had kind of lost that love and feeling, and it was not where you wanted to be in life or work or whatever. And then we'll talk through what you did to recover from that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we all have something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was about 15 years old, I got really into music. I formed a rock jazz band. We did rock tunes, but then we jammed on sort of like a Grateful Dead or a jazz fusion type approach too. And so, or like Fish, the band Fish now. And so I got really into music, and I practiced 3 hours a day. I mean, I remember I had a job as a busboy at a restaurant, and if I had to be there at 11 o'clock or even 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning for brunch, I'd get up at 6 o'clock so I could get my 3 hours of practicing in before I went to work. That kind of drive and motivation. And I didn't care that I wasn't that good at the time. That never even entered my mind, to get down on myself at that point, because I just knew that if I stuck with it, I loved it so much that it would click at some point. And so I basically spent about the next 15 years of my life becoming the professional musician that I always wanted to be. I was born in New York, but then I was living in Connecticut, so I moved back to New York. I was playing Broadway shows like in the 90s, Swinging on a Star, Smokey Joe's Cafe, a show called The Life by Cy Coleman, assistant musical director for one of them, doing arrangements, really incredible stuff. I loved it. I was playing top jazz clubs with great musicians, the Blue Note in New York, and everything that I had dreamed of when I was a teenager, I was doing. And I remember, but there's sort of a flip side to being a professional musician too, because you're not always playing with people you really want to play with, and also sometimes they're not even nice people, and most of them are, but sometimes they're not. And then you're not always playing the kind of music you want to play every day either, which is fine. You're developing your skills, you're getting better, but it's not 100% perfect, just like nothing's 100% perfect. And I remember I was on stage at Carnegie Hall, because I used to do this leukemia benefit with the New York Pops every year. It was called the Laurie Strauss Leukemia Foundation Benefit. And it was really wonderful. I got to arrange music for the full orchestra. I worked with Skitch Henderson, the conductor of the New York Pops. Broadway stars were singing the songs. I did an arrangement where I remember it was a tribute to Sheldon Harnick, and standing right next to him on stage. He wrote the lyrics for Fiddler on the Roof and such. And I remember very clearly looking around at the orchestra, and some of them were just loving it, and then some of them were really unhappy, and it wasn't just the people in New York Pops. There were some people brought in, so I don't know exactly who they were. But I said, what is the difference between the people who are really loving it and the people who aren't having a good time? They're just feeling the pressure or the drudgery or something. And at the same time, since I did this every year, I remember one time I was there and I looked out at the audience, and it was just such a comfortable feeling, like I was in my living room, just playing for all these people, and there was a warmth and everything, on stage at Carnegie Hall. And then the next year, I remember doing the same thing, and I'm like, shaking in my tuxedo, involuntarily just nervous. And then the warm feeling would come back, and it kind of came, ebbed and flowed. And I said, okay, so I've taken 15 years of my life to become the professional musician I always wanted to be, and it's great. But now I'm going to really try to recapture that feeling I had when I was a, quote, amateur or an avocational player. And that's what I realized that the happier players still had. I remember sitting next to this great jazz guitarist at that concert, named Bucky Pizzarelli, and he still had that. He's just, cracking jokes and playing some jazz licks during rehearsal and everything. And he still had that spark that people have when they first get into music. And that's what I wanted to recapture, and I did. And that's what I'm trying to share with everybody I teach, from professionals to adults and kids just getting into it for the first time.
Man, Ron, what an amazing story you have there. And even though I know absolutely zero about music, I can completely relate, because I have been in these situations, been on projects in technology, working with amazing people that I respected and that I was, nervous or excited about. And there have been projects where I looked around and other people were just like, meh, it's just another thing. And I looked around at other periods and was like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. This should be exciting. And other people are super jazzed up about doing this thing that we're doing. And I'm like, I don't know. It's just another thing. And so I really like how you got in touch with that inner, like that amateur spirit of, hey, when we were all 15, we were doing this for fun just because it was fun, and not because we were getting paid, not because we had, bills to pay and all that kind of stuff, but just because it was our passion. So how do we get back in touch with that passionate individual? That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
So how did you do that? How did you go about the process of rediscovering that amateur who was passionate about the music again?
Well, it was kind of coincidence too, because I did it professionally. I just tried to tap into my love of the music wherever I was, whatever kind of music I was playing, and that did a lot for me. But sort of coincidentally, at the same time, my wife and I started having a family, and I had 2 wonderful boys, and I didn't want to be out at night all the time anymore. For years at a time. So I still play professionally, but I don't do the sort of grind of, 8 shows a week every night and things like that, because I just wanted to be home at night for the kids. And I didn't want them to feel like music was the thing that took daddy away from them, And so, because I wanted them to like music too, without pushing them into it. And I didn't want them to resent it, because a lot of times, yes, I see friends who have kids in the music business that the kids love music, and it works for them. But then I know a friend who his father was a well-known musician, and this kid will never go towards an instrument ever again because it was just pushed on him so much. So I wanted to find a nice balance with my own kids. So I stopped performing as much, and I also started teaching a lot more. And I started teaching at a school, after school, where the kids would come to me for piano lessons at the time. And I started teaching improvisation along with the note reading basics to a lot of 5 to 8-year-olds. And I'm going to play a little piano to demonstrate. And, I would just get them, and kids can do it so much easier than a lot of adults, because they're not self-critical in the same way. I'm saying, just take your right hand and play any note on the, any white note, just for reference, the white notes. And just listen to it, and then play another note nearby, and then another one. And, they could do it like anybody could, right? You could do that. And then I would play a little accompaniment, like maybe something like this. And I would say, okay, now when I play that, you play that melodic line you just played. And if you hit a bad note that doesn't sound right with mine, just go to the next note. And it would sound like something like this between the two of us. I do that that for about 10 minutes out of a 30-minute lesson, and they loved it so much, because it's what we were talking about before. It's that side of the piano lessons that would either connect with their way of communicating with others through language, creating it themselves. It's not a struggle. It's just kind of easy to do if you have somebody guiding you the right way. And it would really, we just sit next to each other on the piano bench or two adjacent chairs, and it really was something we were doing together. I wasn't like the expert and they were the beginner at that point, because we're just listening to each other and making this amazing music together. And it would sound just like I did. I didn't exaggerate there. And I found that after about 2 years of doing that, my own jazz playing just went off the charts. I'd play a professional gig, and I just sit down, and it would be like, it would just flow out of me like it never even did before. And I think it was because I was able to lower my own inhibitions or my self-critiquing, or is this good enough, or is it enough like bebop, or whatever it was, in the same way that these kids were. So I was helping them, but they were helping me without knowing it. And it just blossomed from there.
Oh, man, Ron, that is awesome. First of all, thank you for sharing the story. Second of all, thank you for providing the backdrop, the examples, the music, because, hearing the story and then hearing the music is completely different. It opens up new senses. It brings a lot more emotion to the story, and I can feel, as that 5 to 8 year old kid sitting down and not being judged, right? Not being in a position where you have to get it right, like you have to memorize. Here are the 3 different, hand positions or keys to input, and be stressed about I have to get it right. And just play. Just let it play, and then you'll play along, and you'll adapt to each other.
Yeah, and I think the most successful professional musicians, at least in the sort of pop jazz world, successful in terms of being musical too, not just commercially successful. I think they have this, and ever since the unfortunate passing of the musician Prince, who I just basically idolized, a lot has come out on the internet, and if you Google things like working with Prince, things like that, you get stories of people who worked with him. And apparently once you were trusted by him as part of his band and this, he let you make mistakes. Like if you were doing a solo or recording on an album, sometimes he'd include your mistakes on the final product, and the keyboard player would be like, no, I don't like that solo, it had mistakes in it. But Prince is like, but we don't care because it sounds so good and it's so rhythmic or emotional or something, or it just grooves. And he didn't hold that against people, apparently. He let them be creative and express themselves. And they said they learned from him in that way.
So, Ron, in just a moment, I want to ask you about what we can do, regardless of if we're in music or if we're in other fields in our careers or just life in general, what we can do to tap into this sense of improvisation where we're not really judgmental on ourselves and on other people. We're just letting it flow, and over the course of a couple of years, maybe we'll get to a higher being, a higher sense of professionalism, because we have maybe stopped worrying so much about getting it right, every time. I'm going to ask you lots of questions about that because I'm super excited about it. But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors.
This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Minio Cloud Storage. Minio is a cloud object storage server for developers and DevOps written in Go. The Go programming language is the emerging language of choice for modern cloud infrastructure projects, and it allows Minio to be highly concurrent and lightweight. Minio is Amazon S3 compatible, built with microstorage architecture in mind, but at its heart, Minio is simple, scalable, and supported by a passionate developer and user community. In episode 89 of Hello Tech Pros, I talked with A.B. Periasamy, one of the founders of Minio, about the importance of community support and recruiting software developers who are as passionate about their product's code as artists are of their art. Check out that episode at hellotechpros.com/89 and check out Minio Cloud Storage at minio.io. That's minio.io.
Okay, we're back with Ron Drodos, who is the founder of KeyboardImprov.com. We're talking to Ron about a motivational story he had of, just not feeling that job every now and then, just getting into a position where you're kind of at the pinnacle of your career. You're doing great stuff. Maybe you're in that senior position or that lead position where everybody's looking to you. You have quote unquote made it. But you're just not feeling it. And so what can you do to kind of recapture that innocence that you lost somewhere along the way of that amateur, that 15-year-old, that young person who was really, really excited about the role that you were going to take on, the industry that you were going to get into. And then somewhere along the way, just work kind of, drained it down. That grind drained it down. So what Ron did was started teaching improvisation on the keyboard to 5 and 8-year-olds. And Ron, from this, you said that your career, your personal playing, increased dramatically just by teaching little kids how to do improv piano.
Yeah, I think to put it in sort of universal terms, which I think you're getting at in a great way, is one of the pleasures of my life is that I got to study, when I was younger, I got to study jazz piano with a really great jazz legend named Billy Taylor. And he had played with Charlie Parker in the 40s, 50s, and just a legend, legendary jazz pianist. But he was also a really nice guy, really great, and spent a lot of time with me. And Billy Taylor said that you learn improvisation, learn jazz piano like you would a language. And I've taken that even farther in my own way, in that I think it's the key to what you're talking about, because first of all, if you're learning a language, and this is about learning anything really, I think you have to have a sort of a step-by-step path. And at the same time, there has to be times when you're not thinking about that step-by-step path. So whether it's technology and just learning the basics of I don't know how to code, but I've seen people learn a little bit. You just learn the basics, and then you learn something else, and you learn something else, and eventually you'll know how to code. With jazz piano, and I've done this with my website, very step-by-step lessons. So okay, I know that if you do this, or as a student, you know that if you do this first lesson and you really get it to the point of fluency, which is a word I use a lot from language, where you can create and you can make a mistake and you can recover and everything, after these 30 lessons over the next year or 2 years or whatever it is, you're going to be at such an amazing level, that you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. But at the same time, you're not just doing that. Sometimes you are just sitting down and improvising, like we were talking about before, and I don't care, what comes out. Even if you're just sort of making, like a little kid, you see a 3-year-old without piano lessons, they sit down at the piano and they just might do stuff like this, like a little bunny rabbit hopping up and down or something, and then they come back the next day and they do it again, and they're exploring, and there's no test, there's no right or wrong, and they might hit something they like or they don't like, and they're exploring, right? So as a teacher, how do you encourage both this step-by-step learning and this sort of freedom to just try things, right? And I think, getting back to the language analogy, it's really what we do in real life. Because if we're learning a language, or in our native language, whatever we speak, the magic is really, say, in the it's how we use it, but it's also in the interpersonal relationships. It's okay, I know all these words, okay, so what, right? I can speak. But then, you see a friend, and maybe they're having a bad day or something like that. So you sit down next to them, and it's not so much what you say sometimes, it's just the fact that you can communicate. You bond with them, or maybe they feel better, or maybe you just help them get through it, or help them deal with it somehow. Or on the other hand, you're having a great time and you're making these jokes and you're, partying with your friends or something, and that's a great time that makes you feel good. It's not so much the coding or the language, the words, or the notes you're playing. It's how it's fitting into your life, bringing you closer to yourself, or a certain emotion, or interacting with people. And I think whatever you're doing, if you can tap into that. I mean, even when I get on Skype and I talk to my tech person in Florida now, whether it's a problem or we're changing the website around or putting in some new thing we've designed, we're just having fun, and I'll ask him how he's doing, or I'm travel down to Florida, so I asked, what are the Everglades like, and he told me, where to go. It's that moment to moment vibrancy that you can find, and I think we have to find that sometimes. It's not always given to us. Sometimes it is, but then it's our responsibility, I think, to ourselves and really the people we're with to try to find that each step of the way.
Man, such good stuff. As an introvert growing up, I think I'd lean to technology because I was afraid of building connections with other people, right? I was afraid of my own voice. I was afraid of having discussions with people and them thinking I'm an idiot because I can't, form complete sentences without processing it, over processing it, like over analyzing what I'm going to say, before I say it. And so technology was easy for me because it was non-critical. It was just a thing that I had to master on my own as an individual and not, in a group setting. But over the course of my career, I've changed, I've adapted, I've learned, and I could resonate so much with what you're saying here, Ron, because at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is just connect to other people and build relationships and have fun, right? And enjoy life. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to learn a new spoken language or learn a new computer programming language or learn the language of music. I think it's really all about how we can relate to other people and how we can communicate and build relationships with one another.
Exactly, and if you don't mind me saying so, you're the proof that this works, because you're an incredible interviewer, and I would never have thought that at one time, maybe whatever you said, being introverted or whatever. It's amazing.
It has definitely been a process. It's still a process that I'm going through. Every single time I get in front of this mic, I have to take a deep breath, take a deep breath, take a drink of water, and say, you know what, I've done this. This is now 106 times that I've done this this interview process. This is episode number 106, and I am better today than I was a few months ago, and I'll be more natural at it, a year from now than I am today. And it's all about learning. It's all about learning and experimenting and teaching. And same thing with music as anything else.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I just thought about, in terms of our own, getting out there and doing it, is that in general, people aren't as critical as we think they are, And again, that's what I wanted to say about language. If you learn a language, right, and you're telling a joke to somebody or a story, or somebody asks you for directions and you say, oh yeah, well, you go down there, and then you realize you're wrong. You could just correct yourself, right? We do that all the time. We just say, oh no, it's not that way, it's this way, right?
Right.
And as long as you're getting to the end result, it's fine. Not every word has to be perfect in our conversation, yet sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect at every step of the way, where people really aren't putting that kind of pressure on us at all, because they're just insecure themselves a little bit, And I think the mark of a professional, yes, professionals have a body of knowledge that that they can draw upon, and maybe answer some of the tough questions, or play that incredible piece of music, or if something goes wrong, come up with a solution based on what they already know, and figure things out. But I'll give you an example. I was playing with a regular gig that I play a lot, and there was a substitute vocalist who was really great, but was put in there without any rehearsal, and yeah, just because there was no rehearsal, and even though this person was wonderful, there was a few things that were different. Like, I would play an introduction, and they would come in after 2 measures instead of the usual 4 or something like that. And it was fine. I didn't even think twice about it. I've been doing this so long. I just went with it. And there's one guy in the audience who knows me very well, and he was just beaming. He was smiling so much after the performance. And he came up to me. He goes, Ron, you just reminded me what a wonderful thing it is to be in the presence of a professional, a true professional. And, I'm humble enough I can say this, because it's not just about me. It's about every professional a true professional, because it's about the little things from moment to moment. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily that 60-yard pass that wins the game at the end of a game, or the home run or something all the time. Sure, they have that, but it's about what to do when things aren't going so well. You just know how to adapt, because you know the language, the technology, the musical components so well. That, I remember, when I was playing open mics in New York, where singers would just come in, 50, 60 singers, audition. I'd play an introduction in a certain key, and the singer would come in a different key. And I would just, okay, now we're in this key. You can't plan for that kind of thing, but that's the part of the fun too. Learning the language so well that you can just deal with whatever happens, and you're all working together.
Yeah, I love that you spent a lot of time in your early on in your career to kind of learn the mechanics, learn that process of that fluency, like you said before, right? That step-to-step path to fluency, to get to where kind of all the things, and you don't have to practice them individually anymore. You can now bend them and shape them and intertwine them together in this improvised, process, where you're taking bits and pieces of what you've learned in the past and now stitching them together to make something brand new.
Yeah, exactly. And as you're implying, it's exactly the same thing as language. So we all know how to do that already. We just have to apply it to our given profession or interests.
Awesome. Ron, this has been so great, but we're running out of time. So before we go, could you share some parting words of wisdom for our audience, the best way that we can connect with you? And then we'll say goodbye. It's
keyboardimprov.com. And I offer about over 300 video lessons in well-organized courses, from intro to jazz, intermediate and advanced, jazz ballads. I also have beginning improvisation. I have a whole sequence of flowing water lessons that'll take you. It's that step-by-step thing I was talking about before. If you've never improvised and you're a little afraid of it, I designed these flowing water lessons so that it's impossible to be self-critical while you're doing them. You literally just play what I ask you to play or show you on video, and then they go step by step till you're playing things like that after about 20 lessons, and then how it applies to jazz and even rock and stuff like that. I would love to hear from everybody. I have a YouTube channel, keyboardimprov.com, where I'm putting out, I have a new series called Journey Through the Real Book. The Real Book is the sort of Bible of jazz tunes, and I'm going page by page, tune by tune. I started with the first one last Friday, Duke Ellington's The African Flower, and I'm every Friday I'm posting a little bit about that tune and playing it on video for you. And there's over 450 tunes in the Real Book, so it's going to take me 9 years.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it's what we're talking about. It's a way to keep me inspired too, because I haven't played all those tunes. And so I'm going to revisit tunes I've been playing for years, but also learn new tunes myself. And I made this commitment to myself, and I'm even saying it here. So I'm going to be doing this for 9 years, if at all possible.
That's awesome. What a way to motivate yourself and motivate your audience as well, to get everybody inspired to try something new and go along with you. You're the seasoned pro who's been doing this for years, doing this your entire career, and there's even songs that you don't know how to do, so you're going to figure it out and put them online. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ron, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your insight and wisdom and your stories and your music, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy Monday to spend time with us.
Thank you, Chad. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. Guys, remember, it doesn't matter if we're talking about music or language or technology. Sometimes we're way too critical on ourselves. We want everything to be perfect. We want everything to be right the first time. We look up to to our mentors, the people that have inspired us when we were younger and wanted us to get to these positions. And then once we start to get in these, these top level positions in our company or in our career, we start to have self-doubts and say, who am I? Who am I to lead these teams? Who am I to launch a new technology? Who am I to be this amazing presenter on stage, or this amazing musician playing before a crowd? Forget all that. Forget all that junk. Get back to where you were when you were 15 and you were excited about it, or where you were when you first started your career and you were excited about it. And just improv, just riff, just have fun. You've been listening to Ron Drodos, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care.
The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/106. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Motivation Monday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I talk about productivity. On Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. Then next week, we start it all over again with Motivation Monday. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.